don't be afraid to make an email. Don't be afraid to make a call. You never know what's going to come of it. You might send 100 emails and you only get one back, but getting that one email back might be the one that changes things and changes your trajectory on your baseball career. All right, we are live. Josh, how was the first weekend of games?
First weekend of games, it wasn't very good for the team. We took 3 losses. But honestly, as a pitching staff, we did pretty well. Most of the losses were because of a couple of errors here and there. We couldn't hit too much, so we couldn't put up any runs. But as a pitching staff, we did pretty well. Our starters went long. Our relievers shut them down. A couple runs here and there made us lose, but overall, I thought it wasn't too bad.
Nice. And I'm sure just being out at your affiliate and the season starting, just having your first weekend in general is probably just a good feeling to be out there. And obviously it's a long season, so the wins will come.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our team is so good. On paper, they were saying it's one of the best teams that they've ever seen. So we're full of prospects, and I'm sure that we're going to turn around. And yeah, it's definitely good being out at an affiliate. I'm in Hickory, North Carolina, and it's a small town, but it's beautiful. So I'm in my apartment right now, and yeah, it feels good.
Love it. Yeah, I was checking the box scores to see if you were pitching. I know you said you weren't sure if you're going to pitch this first weekend, but I'll definitely be looking for that next week to see how your first outing goes.
Yeah, for sure. I pitched in the exhibition game against a community college on Tuesday. And so I think I'm just on a rotation, more of a piggyback role this year. So I'm going to be pitching Tuesdays or Wednesdays once a week.
Nice. That's kind of nice. I mean, obviously being a starter is preferred, but like a piggyback situation is pretty common in the minor leagues and isn't a bad way to get consistent work. So that's good. So, dude, this week was kind of insane in Major League Baseball. It seemed like every day that there was a new pitcher getting hurt or something was going on. Like Spencer Strider obviously jumps off the page. Shane Bieber, another one. And I don't know if he actually got hurt, but like I saw someone posting about Kevin Gausman, his velo was like super low in his last outing. Like he was even throwing some fastballs like 87, 88, which is unheard of for him because he throws 95 to 98. So, it's kind of nuts, really. And, you go on Twitter, you go on any social media, and you just see people just blowing these players up or coaches for, the training methodologies that are going on saying, oh, it's weighted balls or it's his mechanics or there's all these things that like people think they have it figured out why injuries are happening down to a T. Like from your perspective as a player, I don't know if obviously you probably haven't been talked about on social media, but like I think about like being a Shane Bieber, being a Spencer Strider, and like I wonder if they ever see people comment about them. But like what would your thoughts be, or what would be going through your head if you saw people just blasting you on social media about why you got hurt?
Yeah, I mean, injuries is such a hard thing. I mean, I've been injured plenty of times in my career. I had my back surgery, and honestly, it just comes out of nowhere sometimes, especially like with my back. I was doing everything right, I thought, and it just kind of, my disc just exploded while I was doing a back squat. And so it's kind of a freak thing. In terms of Shane Bieber and Spencer Strider, I don't know what's going on there, but I think as players, we're squeezing so much performance out of our body on a day-to-day basis. And especially for guys who are throwing, upper 90s to 100, I mean, it just takes a toll on the body. And sometimes it's just going to give out. And I don't know if there's one specific factor that caused it, but I think it's just, the human body sometimes is just going to give out when you're putting so much force into the baseball.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. Like we could have a whole podcast about every single topic. We could talk about mechanics. We could talk about the way you're building up your workload, all those things, because a lot of these injuries do happen at the beginning of the season or in spring training. And it's just because in some cases there's this big ramp up period that happens too quick for some guys. And they're, trying to make a team or they're trying to impress a coach or they're going to a level that maybe they're not ready for. Like, so that can play into it. There's actually an interesting tweet. So Bauer posted a question about this on Twitter, asking people like why people think all these injuries are happening. And someone commented back and said, is it because the ramp ups are too quick? Do they need to start throwing earlier for arm to adjust? Injuries or distress from season before that pitcher fought through? Bauer responded, yep, the death spiral. Arm gets banged up during the season, take pills to mask it, and get through the year. Take more time off in the offseason to let the body recover. Go to spring less prepared than usual, expected to throw harder than usual in spring to make the team or keep up. And I never really thought of it from that perspective of how, an injury that happens right now, it might have started because of something that happened last season, right? Because you're trying to get through that season and you finally get to the off season and you need time off to recover because you're so beat up. And then you end up not giving yourself enough time to ramp up, or you try to go full throttle during spring training when you're not ready. But it's because the demand for it is there, right? Like you're fighting for a spot. There's very few people in Major League Baseball to where it doesn't matter what their spring training looks like. They're going to be okay. And they're going to have, the spot in the rotation or whatever that they want to have. So there's just like, nowadays compared to 20 years ago, I feel like spring training, you have to be in midseason form. You can't be showing up with spring training as a way to get your arm back in shape. You have to be there ready to go full throttle right away because there's someone right behind you trying to take your job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the times have just changed to where spring training right now is a time to make a team. And back like a couple years ago, it was a time to get ready. But it is difficult because like I felt it. I came into spring training like full throttle. I'm ready to go. And then a week in, I get a back spasm because maybe I wasn't prepared for it. But it's tough to look at it like that because when you come into spring training in mid-season form, maybe you break down at the end of the season. So it's kind of like a balance of that. But yeah, I've definitely seen players go through those stages where, all right, I'm hurting a little bit. All right, now I'm going to take a couple pills and, red hot to try to mask it. I'm doing that right now with my back actually because I had that back spasm, but I'm still trying to go and compete. So, but yeah, that death spiral thing is really interesting. And I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of studies into it to see if there actually is something behind that.
For sure. Quick note, red hot. That stuff is magic. I used to use that on my elbow all the time when I was throwing. It's amazing how much that helps. But yeah, I mean, this is a tough question for you. But if you had to pick one thing, and this is nearly an impossible question, but if you had to pick one thing, what do you think is the leading cause of injuries today in baseball? What is the number one cause?
For pitches, I think it just comes back to we're just trying to like velo is in demand right now. Everyone's trying to throw 100. And so we're doing all this training and throwing to try to get there. But sometimes the human body, like it's a tiny ligament, the UCL, sometimes it's just going to give out. And I think that's just a byproduct of the velo training and something that we can't really get around. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, along those lines, I would completely agree. I don't want to say it's a necessary evil because velocity is important. It's good. But because we have to push ourselves, or players have to push themselves so hard and so frequently that sometimes things break, right? We are pushing ourselves to the limit. You are redlining yourself essentially. And that's why all of those other details like recovery and taking care of yourself away from the field are so important, because when you are pushing yourself as hard as, you are and other pro athletes are and collegiate athletes, every single detail matters. And if you're not taking care of every single part of those things, let's just say you're not maximizing recovery, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not taking care of the things that are really fundamentals and in your control, but you're redlining your velocity work, 2-3 times a week, over time, that's going to add up. So we have to really, really be aware of the workload, of course, and we also have to be aware of what we're doing in between those velo days to making sure that we're maximizing the recovery the best we can. In some cases, it's inevitable, regardless of what you do. Like some guys just get hurt despite having quote unquote perfect mechanics, taking care of themselves. Sometimes people break and things happen, but as long as you're doing the things that are in your control, you're at least going to give yourself the best opportunity. And I saw something, I forget who tweeted it. that 80 miles an hour is basically the limit that the arm can handle, or something along those lines. Don't quote me exactly on this, but some of the comments, what I was thinking was, okay, yeah, maybe 80 miles an hour for whatever reason. He says that is the limit of what the arm can handle through high school. But how many high school kids do you know that are getting recruited throwing 80 miles an hour? How many kids that are throwing 80 miles an hour, at 17, 18 years old are going to LSU, or going to Arizona State, or going to, it doesn't even have to be a good Division I school. It could be even some Division II schools and other spots. So, that's the topic we want to talk about today is recruiting. This is a little segue. We'll get away from the injuries for a second, but from a recruiting standpoint, throwing 80 miles an hour typically isn't going to get the job done. In some cases, maybe you get an opportunity, but for most kids that want to go to high-level college baseball, 80 miles an hour isn't going to be enough, and they have to push themselves, within a certain range. We're not trying to, crush high school kids and trying to do too much, but at the same time, they do have to put in the work to throw harder, to throw more strikes, develop good off-speed pitches if they want to reach their full potential and reach their goals of playing Division I baseball. So, for you were throwing 78 at 16 years old. When you were 16 years old, before you started your training journey, were you trying to reach out to schools, or were you trying to get recruited before you made that velocity jump?
Yeah. So what actually happened was that I went on a travel ball team. It was like an Australian travel ball team, and we went out to Arizona. And so it was supposed to be like a recruiting trip. And at that time, I was throwing, I think I was throwing like low 80s, but I had a friend who was throwing in the low 90s. And so we would go out and showcase, and then I would just see him getting all these offers from big time colleges, pro scouts, big time JUCOs, and I would get nothing. And I was like, why is this happening? And when I really broke it down, I kind of figured out that, okay, like velo is something that is a necessity if I want to get recruited. I can't just, throw low 80s and throw strikes and try to get recruited. It's just going to have to be something that I work at. And that's kind of where I got the realization of, okay, I need to gain like, 10 miles an hour if I really want to get to where I want to be.
Did someone help you come to that realization, or was it just simply no schools were interested and you've kind of just figured out on your own that I need to throw harder?
I think at the time there was like a big thing about, oh, if you throw 90, you'll get recruited. And so I had that, but also I was just looking at all the guys who were getting into these powerhouse universities, powerhouse D1s. And I was watching things like the Perfect Game USA. And, the trend is that all of them are throwing 93, 94 miles an hour. And so I kind of just looked at myself and said, all right, like 83 is not going to cut it if I want to go to a powerhouse D1, which is what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I got the realization of velo was a necessity, not just something that you don't have to work on.
Yeah. So once you started throwing harder and schools were getting interested, were you reaching out to them? Like, were you sending emails to schools, or was your coach making phone calls, or was it simply you started going to showcases again and they just saw you and liked you and they started reaching out to you?
Yeah. So once I got my velo up, I was actually at driveline baseball and I was throwing about, 90 to 93 miles an hour. I got the video of myself, and it's actually funny. I don't throw a single strike in that video. Like the catch is set up, and yeah, I don't throw a single strike. But I was like, all right, it's fine. I got that video, and I cold approached like 100 college coaches. I cold emailed, sorry. I was like, hey, coach, whatever. I really love your university because, and I try to make it personalized. I didn't just like mass send because that's going to get ignored like most of the time. But anyway, I did that, and I didn't really get any replies, probably because I didn't throw a single strike. Um, but what did happen was that the coach at University of Washington, he reached out to a guy called Ryan Roland Smith in Australia, and he ran one of the biggest travel ball teams in Australia. And so I got connected with Ryan, and I was able to get on that showcase team, and we all went out to Arizona to showcase, and that's kind of where it all started. Where I was throwing 93, 94 at that showcase, and the Ryan, he's well connected. He was reaching out to a lot of these coaches to try to come and watch us, and yeah, that's kind of where the offers started to roll in, and my recruiting process really kicked off.
Was that your junior year, or what time frame was that when you started actually getting interest from schools?
This was my senior year. Senior year of high school, and I know that's not the most ideal. You kind of want to get recruited, sophomore, junior year, because, like, especially when I was getting recruited, a lot of these powerhouses had their recruiting classes filled up. They didn't have any spots, and they were like, "Look, like, if you want to come to our team, like, you're gonna have to walk on. We have no scholarship money left for this recruiting class." And so, ideally, you want to be throwing in the low 90s by your junior year. But I mean, I think the lesson is, even if you're not, I think just keep training and training, and it's not going to be too late if you have the talent.
That's a good point. When you're good, they'll find room for you. They'll find a way to get you on campus. Like, yes, is it more ideal for it to be early in your career? Of course. But that doesn't mean that you're doomed if you're, a senior in the fall of your senior year and you still haven't committed. So truthfully for me, now I didn't go to a 4-year school out of college. I went the JUCO route, but I didn't commit to a school until literally May of my senior year. So 2 or 3 months before school started. I was getting recruited a little bit during my senior year. Junior year, not really at all. I was throwing 78 to 80 miles an hour. Left-handed, yes. But just velocity was not there. Senior year, velocity still wasn't really there. I was like low 80s, around 80 to 82. But at every showcase I went to, like I went to Perfect Game Showcase and all that, like I just dominated and just struck out everybody despite not throwing hard. So I was getting some interest from some schools then. But believe it or not, academically, I was not very good. I had horrible grades, which when you're a fringe guy and you have bad grades, like there's basically no chance that you're going to go to, a really good program at that point. Now, if I was throwing, 90 to 93 from the left side and I had, average or below average grades, they would probably find a way to get me on campus. But because I wasn't a good student and I was a fringe guy from a pitching standpoint for a major Division I school, there weren't a ton of opportunities there. So I kind of had in my head that I was going to go the JUCO route pretty early on. But I still didn't know where I was going to go. Like schools wanted to see me pitch in the spring. Then, of course, during the spring, they have games going on. So there was really no time for them to come watch me. And then I basically went to like a tryout for Chandler Gilbert Community College in May. So May is when high school baseball season ends in Arizona. And I went to like this like tryout thing. It was like they still could offer you a scholarship, but in JUCO in Arizona, like scholarships are literally like $325 for a semester. Like there's no full rides for JUCO. It's just like kind of here's a little amount to show you that we want you, but like we can't offer full rides at a junior college. So I went to a tryout for Chandler Gilbert, did really well. And then I also threw for a couple other schools. Through one of them was South Mountain Community College, which is where I ended up signing. But like I literally threw for them. I think it was like the end of May, and school was starting 2 months later, and that was when I made my commitment to go the JUCO route. So all that to say is, regardless of where you're trying to go or what your path is, it's never too late. Like, you see guys, especially nowadays, you see kids committing or verbally committing, I should say, as freshmen and sophomores. And, if those are your buddies or you see people like, oh, man, I want that to be me. I wish I was the one that was getting, recruited right now. Use that as motivation to work hard and keep going, but don't use it as a way to lose hope that it's too late for you to get recruited. You're going to have to settle for, a certain school or a certain level. Keep pushing, keep working, understand that as long as you get to a certain skill level, like there will be opportunities for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I would even go to say, I'm curious as to what you think about this, Jared, but if your goal is to, get to Pro Bowl or like a powerhouse university, and you're just not there yet when you're like, a senior, I would even go to say that like a gap year could be super valuable. if you can train and take a bet on yourself and get that velo up, and then you can try to get recruited or signed. What do you think about that, Jared?
Yeah, the gap year thing is kind of a newer concept for me. Like when I was playing, that wasn't really an option. Like really, it was like if you weren't ready to play at a 4-year school, you would go the JUCO route, or if you didn't have the grades or something like that. So I can't say I really have like a strong opinion on it. Like I kind of tend to lean towards the JUCO route. That way, you're still playing games and you have stats to go off of. But with that said, when you're in a team setting, you are limited on the training. It's, you're obviously in an in-season type of mode. And really the only time you have to yourself is the summer when you're not on a team. So there is something to be said for the gap year. I think it just kind of depends on what is the missing link for you. If it is velocity, if it is like you got to raise the floor by a lot, then that might be the best route for you. Versus if it's just a grade issue or a command issue or something like that, I think the JUCO route is probably the better option. But at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to whatever your goals are and really what you want to do. I will say this, that yes, it looks good and great to go to a 4-year school out of high school, especially a big Division 1. But I can't tell you how many times I have seen like literally top high school baseball players in their state go to a Division 1 school and they get 5 at bats their freshman year, or they throw 2 innings their freshman year. It happens so much. Like like my time frame, I graduated 2010. There was a pitcher in Arizona named Jake Barrett. He went to Desert Ridge High School, really good high school baseball program out here. They won, I think, back-to-back state championships. He was a two-way guy. He hit for a lot of power. He threw 95 plus on the mound. He got drafted, I want to say it was like the 4th round out of high school. He decided not to sign. He went to Arizona State. His freshman year, I think he only pitched 10 innings his freshman year. And he was the #1 player in the state of Arizona, was a 4th round draft pick. Now, back in 2010, Arizona State was a really good program. I want to say they went to the College World Series that year. But still, he was the #1 player in a very good baseball state, and he still got limited innings his freshman year. So I'm not saying that like freshmen or that high school students shouldn't go to 4-year schools out of high school. But what I am saying is it isn't always as glamorous as it sounds. There's a lot of people that go to a school, they transfer out of it because they're not playing or something happens. Like you need to understand what your goals are and what's important to you. And those things should be, from a baseball perspective, a place where you're going to be able to develop and get better, and a place where you're going to have an opportunity to get meaningful innings so that you can actually pitch. So with that said, if that's the gap year, if a gap year is the best route for you for 1 year, I'm on board with it. If it's the JUCO route, I'm on board with it. If you think you have a really good opportunity to play as a freshman at a 4-year school, do that. There's really no right answer to these things, but you need to make sure that you're educated on all the different circumstances that come along with it.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point, actually. And sometimes it's better to be the guy at a smaller school than one of the many guys who throws 93, 95 at a powerhouse university. And that's something that I was actually really considering when I was going through my recruiting process was, okay, I throw 93 miles an hour right now, but everyone on this staff at a powerhouse university is going to be throwing 93 miles an hour. So, I wasn't opposed to going out and competing for a spot, but it also was a little bit of a risk of, dang, well, if I have a really bad fall, then I could get like very minimal innings in the season because, colleges are out here to win. But maybe if I go to a smaller D1, a mid-major, and I'm one of the harder throwing guys, I have one of the best stuff on the staff, then I'll have more of an opportunity to go out and compete and get more innings and, more leeway to go out and fail and learn and go out and play.
Were there some mid-majors or smaller schools that you were considering? Because I know Stanford was, the dream school, but I guess number one, did you commit to Stanford? I don't even know if you actually committed there or what that path looked like. Because I know you ended up signing pro ball out of high school, but what were the options you were weighing, and where were you actually committed to?
Yeah. So I showcased in Arizona. So most of my college offers came from the West Coast. And so I went on visits to most of the Pac-12 schools. I went to, Arizona State, UW, Stanford, and all of these places. But there was one school called Tulane University that came out, and they really loved me. And this was a question where I was like, okay, do I want to go out and have a major role at a mid-major, or go into a Pac-12 and compete for a spot? And there was a lot of factors that went into it, like scholarship money. The powerhouses aren't able to offer as much as a mid-major. Um, but in 2019, I ended up committing to Tulane University. But there was some stuff that happened where, like, the coaches left, and the recruiting coordinator left. I think the head coach left as well, and so I think my commitment wasn't solid, and so I would have had to find another school. But then I signed with the Philadelphia Phillies, so that's kind of how it happened. But yeah, it's a tough question. Even college versus Pro Bowl is another whole conversation. But yeah, you just have to weigh out the pros and cons of both of them and really just figure out what's the best path for you.
Yeah, you brought up another good point too about how college coaches, sometimes leave. And if you're committing, as a freshman or a sophomore, there's no saying if it's even going to be the same coaching staff by the time you get there. And then that creates a whole nother mess with, do they still want to keep you? Or, I don't know how it works if like you're free to get out of your commitment if a school or if a coach changes schools. Is that right?
I'm pretty sure that's how it happens. And this actually happened to one of my good friends out of Australia. He was committed to UW as a sophomore. And a year later, the whole coaching staff changes. And now they didn't honor his scholarship and they didn't want to bring him on. And so he lost that commitment and he ended up going to a JUCO. But yeah, it's kind of scary sometimes when it's like you're committing to a school and then you don't know if the coaches are still going to be there, if they still want you. Coaches are changing all the time. But has that ever happened to you?
No, not to me personally, but I have heard about that happening with a lot of guys. It is, yeah, it's interesting how that happens. I don't think it's, I don't want to say it's not common, but I don't think it's, super, super common. But it's definitely something to consider when you're looking at your school and deciding where you want to go. Something that I think would be helpful for our listeners, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, is writing emails. And this is something that I did all the time when I was trying to get recruited, and when I was, especially when I was at a JUCO, trying to get to a 4-year school after that, is emailing schools, knowing what to say, what they're looking for. And, now being on the other side and having been a college coach for a little bit, and just kind of knowing what I know now, I think we could help a lot of high school kids with the recruiting process of reaching out to schools and what to say, maybe not what not to say. Like for you, when you were writing your emails, like what were the big things that you were including in that email and touching on that you wanted to get across to the coach?
Yeah, for me, it was just I was trying to emphasize I throw a 90 plus. I think one of the biggest mistakes is like videos of game tape of you just striking out the house, but there's no like metrics to go along with it. There's no velo, there's no TrackMan or anything. Um, but for me, it was I think in my heading I said right-handed pitcher, 90 to 93 miles an hour, 2020 class, something along those lines. But it was very straightforward, and I was just trying to say that I throw hard enough to get recruited, and um, yeah, there wasn't too much. It was probably like a couple sentences of okay, why I love the school and stuff like that. But even that, I don't think is super necessary. What do you think?
Completely agree. So starting with the header, like it needs to be flashy. Like I love what you just said. Like you put the headline of like what is kind of the main draw for you, which was 90 to 93, right-hand pitcher. You said what class? That's perfect. Because think about it, especially with these big schools, and really not even the big schools. I would say all of them. They get so many emails from kids wanting to play there. So you have to have something that initially jumps off the page, especially if you're kind of just cold emailing people without a connection to them. It's going to take a lot for your name or for something in that email to flash and jump at them. So that's number one, a really good header. Number two would be the body. Like, you want this to be as short and compact as possible while still giving them the necessary numbers and information that they need. So things that I would make sure I hit on would be height, weight, class, the high school that you go to, and then give just really quick bullet points on your velos for all of your pitches. So fastball 90-93, slider 83 to 85, so on and so forth. If you have a TrackMan report, definitely include that. And then the next thing I would do is, from a video standpoint, send video, but like you said, you want to have something that's like objective with it. And I mean, if you have a TrackMan report, it's not as important because they can look at the TrackMan report. But if you don't, at least have a radar gun showing in the video for a few clips so they can see all of your velos for your pitches. Make sure you have good quality, get a side view for them behind the mound or behind the plate, and make sure that this video is not long. Like, this video should be probably 30 seconds max. They're not going to sit there and watch a 5-minute video of you pitching against, some high school for an hour. So make it very quick, good quality, have all the objective numbers that they need. And then, of course, make sure that you list your own phone number for them to call, and then have, at least one recommendation or a coach, whether it's your high school coach or travel coach, with their name and their phone number. And then I always try to, obviously this isn't always possible, but try to find a connection with that coach, whether it's, another coach that you play for, maybe someone on the team, just any sort of connection to where you can tie yourself together to where you can connect, and he'll have more of a reason to follow up with you because there's some sort of connection there. I think that always helps. But at the end of the day, be as quick with those emails as you can, as far as giving them the key information. Like you said earlier as well, make sure that you put their actual name at the top. Don't just say, "Hey coach," or "Dear coach," because that makes it pretty obvious that you're sending the exact same email to 100 colleges. Like, make it a little personal. Make sure you put their name, say something about the school, something that makes it a little bit more personable. But other than that, like, it doesn't need to be long and fluffy. They don't need your whole life story. They don't have time for that. They have a lot of emails that they're getting and going through. So you want to make sure you hit them as quickly as you can with the big hits, and provide a short and concise video with all the information that they need.
And do you think you should email the head coach or the recruiting coordinator?
Recruiting coordinator for sure. I mean, if you want to do the head coach, I guess you could. But I would recommend the recruiting coordinator because they are the ones that do this. Now, if you are a pitcher and the recruiting coordinator is the hitting coach, I would send it to the recruiting coordinator and the pitching coach so that he can see that as well. Because a lot of the times, even if the pitching coach isn't the recruiting coordinator, he'll still handle a lot of the pitchers just because that's obviously his area of expertise. So he'll definitely get a say in the pitchers that they're bringing into the program. So you could send it to both of those guys. And then as far as finding the emails, it's pretty straightforward. Go on their website, the baseball website. If you click on the coaches tab, it will have a list of the coaches. Sometimes right there, it'll just have their emails right next to their names. Or if it doesn't, click on their name, it will take you to their bio, and then it will have their, sometimes their phone number, and it will definitely have their email. And that's also a good way for you to kind of figure out if you do have a connection with that coach through their bio. Like, look at where they've been before. Where are they from? Anything that you can connect yourself to. I think that's really valuable just to build that relationship a little bit further.
Yeah, for sure. I think connections are so important. And, cold emails, I wonder how effective they are, though. What do you think, Jared? Like, cold emails are such a hard medium to try to get recruited on, but do you think it's worth it? What do you think?
Well, I can speak from personal experience that it is how I got to George Mason. Well, sort of how I got to George Mason. I'll tell that story in a second. But it is how I got to independent ball was through cold emailing coaches. So I'm a big believer in it. Like, I have probably sent 1,000 emails to coaches in my life. I can't really remember the JUCO path. I think my travel coach helped me get to South Mountain Community College. But so what happened with South Mountain, or as I was there, my sophomore year at South, I actually wasn't pitching very well. So the fall of my sophomore year, that's the big time to get recruited as a junior college player, is the fall of your sophomore year. I had gained velocity. I was throwing like 85 to 88 in the fall of my sophomore year. I was pitching really well, and I was starting to get recruited by some decent schools. One of them was Grand Canyon. At the time, they were a D2 school with, I think they said by my senior year, they were going to be a Division I school. I had the stubbornness in my mind of I'm playing Division I baseball. I don't want to wait till my senior year to be, for it to be a Division I program. So I held off on that. Had a couple other like Division II type offers, held off on them. Springtime came. I pitched awful to start the season. I was pressing so much because I wanted to get signed. I wanted to go to, a really good school. Still ended up getting some interest from some schools that were some good Division I programs, but like they all fell through. They just kept falling through and falling through. And by the end of my sophomore year, I still didn't have, at that point, I basically lost all of my opportunities, even for the Division II schools, because I waited too long. They gave away those scholarships to other players. So I couldn't even go to a Division I or a Division II school on a scholarship. I was going to have to walk on somewhere. So my plan was, after my sophomore season, was I'm going to try to get into a really good summer league, or as good of a summer league as I can, and try to get recruited here in these next 2 months. And if I don't get recruited, then I'm going to walk on at Arizona State. So what I did was I emailed every single coach in the Cape Cod League, in the West Coast League, the California League, the Northwoods, the Jayhawk League. I literally emailed every single coach in those leagues. I got one email back from a team in the West Coast League, the Kitsap Blue Jackets in Washington. They said, we can offer you a 10-day contract because my season ended earlier than Division I schools end. And they were going to need a few extra players for the first, couple weeks of the season as the playoffs and the season winds down for Division I baseball. So I decided to do it. I drove to Washington, 10-day contract. I pitched 2 times in those 10 days. One I got a save, and the other one I got a win as a starter. Pitched really well, but they were like, we'd love to keep you, but we don't have a spot for you because we got all these other guys that we've already made commitments to that are coming in. And then literally the day I was going to leave, I don't know what happened. I don't know if like a player didn't show up or what, but they decided to keep me. So they kept me the whole summer, pitched pretty well. Around July 1st, George Mason called my summer coach asking if he had any pitchers that were uncommitted for next season that were worth talking about. And I was the only player on my team. Of course, this is a rare thing to be July and to not know where you were going to school the next month. So I was the only kid on the team that wasn't committed to a school. So my summer coach told him about me. I got connected to the pitching coach at George Mason. He literally never even watched me pitch in person. I sent video of me throwing, and then they had me go on a visit. So I went on a visit there about a week later. I liked the school. I felt like it was a good place to be. So I ended up signing. And what was amazing about this was I ended up getting a good scholarship still. And people are probably wondering, how did I get a good scholarship with a month left before school started? Well, back then, the draft was in June, and they had a left-handed pitcher that got drafted, but he was a junior, and they weren't sure if he was going to sign or if he was going to come back to school. And he decided, in July at some point that he was going to sign professionally. So they now had this wide open spot on the team. They had a scholarship. So I was able to take it, and I ended up going there for my next 2 years. So purely because I reached out to all those summer coaches, that is how I ended up getting in the West Coast League. And because I was in the West Coast League there at the right time, I ended up getting an opportunity to play at George Mason. So if that doesn't happen, if I don't play in that summer league or reach out to those schools, who knows what my path looks like? I don't know where I am today or where my baseball journey takes me. But the point of that is, don't be afraid to make an email. Don't be afraid to make a call. You never know what's going to come of it. You might send 100 emails and you only get one back, but getting that one email back might be the one that changes things and changes your trajectory on your baseball career.
Yeah, that's such a great story. I think to get recruited, you're going to have to get lucky somehow. And doing these cold emails just increases your chances of getting lucky. I love the saying of increase your surface area of luck. And so by sending out all of these emails, you're just increasing your chances of getting lucky just by a little bit with every single email. Because as you said, one might be worth it. That was the case for me. I mean, I didn't even get a reply back, but the UW coach got in touch with a guy who has big connections, and he was the guy who really um, got my recruiting journey going. So yeah, that was a great story.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why. It's just emails were always the way I went, just because it was like these are publicly on websites. You can email literally anyone you want, and that's how I got to independent ball. I didn't get drafted after my senior year at George Mason. I don't remember how I even found out about independent ball. Someone told me about it, I'm sure. So I literally emailed every single coach in the American Association, Frontier League, Atlantic League, and the Can-Am League. Those were the 4 main leagues at the time. And I got a couple emails back and ended up signing with a team in the American Association in Wichita. And it was purely because of the email and what I laid out in there. I pitched well my senior year, laid out stats, sent them video. And literally the day I sent that email, one of their left-handed pitchers got hurt. Like it's literally, it's all about timing. You never know when that opportunity is going to pop up. Opportunities present themselves all the time, but you have to be willing to make the call, send the email, put yourself out there. And the worst thing that happens is they say no, and you're in the same exact spot you're in. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain by putting yourself out there and reaching out to coaches.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you touched on the academic side just a little bit, and you said that you didn't have the best grades. I'm curious, what would you have done a little bit different uh, if you could go back on the academic side?
I would have gotten good grades if I could go back.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, here's the thing. I think even if I have good grades in high school, I think I still go the junior college route because physically I wasn't ready to play Division I baseball. And that was my goal. Even going to Division II school or Division III school, like I wasn't ready to play at a 4-year school. And that's not to say that junior college baseball is worse, because I actually think junior college baseball is really, really good, especially in the state of Arizona. Like, we had probably off the top of my head 6 or 7 guys that went Division I both years I was there. We played schools like Central Arizona, who's the #1 school in the country most years for junior college baseball. And I think my freshman year, they had 12 players committed to Power 5 schools. Like, it's like junior college baseball is very, very good. The benefit of it is there's only 2 classes. There's freshmen and sophomores. So it's not like I'm competing with a 20 and a 21-year-old. I'm competing with 18 to 20-year-olds. So it's somewhere more in my age range to where it's more realistic to play right away. Still got to earn it. You still got to, perform well to get those opportunities. But there's a smaller age gap, which makes it a little bit easier. You're competing against people closer to your age. So I think that's still the route I would go. But I do think there would have been value still in me getting good grades just to see what those other opportunities were. Maybe I would have had an opportunity to go somewhere that I really liked, and I would have been okay not playing as a freshman because of the program I would have been in, and I would have had an opportunity to develop and maybe be a standout player by my junior year. There's a bunch of different ways to go about it. Just for me, I knew I wanted to pitch right away, and I was able to throw, close to 60 innings my freshman year and then another 100 innings my sophomore year, which, throwing 160 innings in your freshman and sophomore year total, that doesn't happen a lot if you're going to a Division I school out of high school.
Yeah. And I think something that I actually wanted to hit on was that one of the biggest things for me and my recruiting process was getting into a showcase game called the Arizona Classic Academic Game. And so it's a showcase where if you have an SAT score of, I think it was above 1200 or 1300, something around there, then you're eligible to get in. And at that showcase, there were so many scouts, like 100 plus. And I think it's just easier for coaches to be like, okay, this guy has an SAT score of this. And so we don't have to worry about academics for him. We don't have to dig into what his, GPA, SAT scores are. And so I think what I'm trying to get at is that it's not that hard to get a decent SAT score. I feel like what I did was honestly like an hour a weekend. I would do a practice test and then I would just review what I got wrong. And it wasn't like intense study or anything, but if you can put in just a little bit of effort into it, then it can make a major difference. And it can be the difference between getting, you know, one to two offers to getting all these other offers because your academics cover it, and you don't have to worry as much about scholarship money because maybe you can get an academic scholarship that covers that. And so I think it's a very underrated aspect of getting recruited.
Yeah, you're decreasing the friction that a coach has to go through to get you on campus. Like if he has to jump through all these hurdles to get you, it's probably not going to work out unless you're literally the number one player in your state or something like that. But like the less friction there is for a coach to get you and the less he has to worry about, the better those opportunities are going to be. And that's probably why at that academic game, there were so many scouts in schools there, is because they knew they weren't even going to have to worry about the academic side of things. They knew that was good. So all they had to focus on was just your skill. Are you a player that is a good fit for this program from a skill perspective? And then do you fit in with our culture as a person? Like that, it completely eliminates the need for them to really do homework and dive into the grades and the school aspect of it. And it can really focus on the things that they really do want to focus on more, which is the baseball side of things.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly right. And um, yeah, when I was going through my recruiting process, that's what they told me. They're like, we love how, as an Australian, we don't have a GPA, so they didn't really have to look at that. So all they had to look at was SAT score. And I think I got a pretty good SAT score. I think I got um, like a 1420 or something like that, which is pretty good, I guess. And so they were like, yeah, we love how your academics are all sorted. And now we just have to find a way to get you on campus. And yeah, it just helps immensely because I got like some of the schools could only offer like 30-40% uh scholarships, but then my academic side would cover for another 30-40%. And so a school that might be unaffordable suddenly becomes an option. And so yeah, that was a major role, and I think that's something that a lot of high school kids should focus on. And it doesn't have to take much, an hour a weekend, an hour or two a weekend. If you can focus on that just as much as your baseball training, then you're going to have a good time in your recruiting process.
For sure. This just comes down to making it a priority and understanding the importance of it. Like when I was in high school, I didn't see any value in it for some reason. I had in my head that my grades didn't matter. If I played well, that was going to take care of it. And that's not the reality. So cover all your bases. Don't give a coach a reason not to sign you or to be interested in you. You want to cover all the things that are in your control. I want to transition a little bit to, still on the recruiting aspect of like reaching out to schools, but I want to approach it more from like the social media aspect. I have a lot of high school kids that follow me on Twitter, and I look at their pages sometimes and just look at their bio. I look at the stuff they're posting. I would be curious as, to what you would do. Maybe you did do this. I don't know if you were on Twitter when you were getting recruited, but if you had a recruiting page on Twitter, what do you think should be in your bio, and like what type of stuff should you be posting on a consistent basis?
Yeah, no, I actually didn't do this, but I don't think there were any like recruiting pages when I was getting recruited. I might be wrong, but I know right now there's Flat Ground app, which is a huge one. But the thing is, like Flat Ground app, they repost so many people every day, and so you can kind of get lost on that page, and so you have to find a way to stand out. And so one of the ways is to, I think, again, just having objective numbers. It's the velo and the trackman numbers, and then really trying to emphasize if you have something elite, trying to emphasize that. But again, with the page, I would just be like, same thing as the email, really. I would just be really clear on who I am, right-handed pitcher, left-handed pitcher, what class, how hard I throw, the pitches I throw, and a big one is to not post anything like silly or stupid because if you have that on your page, it can just ruin your whole recruiting process just like that. So I think just being really clear on who you are and doubling down on your strengths will be my biggest things.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And one thing that I would say do not do, maybe I'm wrong with this, but like just looking at it as an outsider, it just doesn't look good to me, is when a player posts a video and he tags like 10 or 15 accounts or schools or coaches in one post. Like it'll be a coach from Arizona State, a coach from Grand Canyon, a junior college coach, a California school coach. Like you're tagging all these people in it as if that's going to help them want to recruit you. I personally just think it's kind of a bad look just to tag all those different schools in it. It just doesn't look clean. And then also you're posting different schools on there, which I just think is kind of a turnoff. I think like whenever I get tagged and stuff like that sometimes too with kids I have never talked to in my life, and they're tagging me in these random videos of them, oh, pitch 2 innings today, 4 strikeouts, 1 walk, great day, or something like that. It's like, okay, that's cool. I'm glad you pitched well, but from a recruiting standpoint, like they don't really care. Like, yes, they want you to pitch well, but like that isn't gonna make them want to watch you and be like, oh, I need to recruit this kid because he threw 2 innings today, had 4 strikeouts, and there's a video from behind home plate showing him, striking out these kids. So make it clean. You want to be very clean looking, be objective, like you said, and don't tag, 10 plus people. I really wouldn't tag any coach. The only thing I would tag is Flat Ground app if you're going to do that. And then, you can link back to that. So say I'm sending an email to a coach, you could link back to that, right? Like I can add my social media accounts, have Twitter on there, and you can even say there's more videos of me pitching on here or something like that. Just a simple tag there. But other than that, like I think more kids do more harm than good with their social media when it comes to getting recruited. So keep all those things in mind. And it's tough when you're 15, 16, you don't have the perspective of a coach. You don't know what they're thinking, how much they're seeing these things. So part of it is just getting educated, and hopefully this segment will help some of those high school kids with those things. And if you have any further questions with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to help you with designing the page, to a certain degree, and kind of telling you some do's and don'ts when it comes to creating your page.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. That's crazy though. Tagging 10 to 15 head coaches. I mean, I don't know if that. Yeah, that's probably just annoying to be honest. Yeah, I don't think it helps in the slightest. So, yeah, as you said, just tag Flatground app, and I know there's a couple more pages recruiting. Just tag them, and then if you are really good and you have the skills, then someone's gonna find you.
100%. Well, let's wrap this up with just a couple other notes. I think you've talked about this before, and we've talked about it together. Is focusing on developing a good product before advertising. Like I think you've used those words exactly, and I love the way that you put that. Is before I try to reach out to schools, before I try to, advertise myself, I want to make sure that I am advertising a product worth looking at, worth recruiting. And part of that includes velocity. Part of it includes grades, like we touched on, commands, off-speed pitches, all of those things. If we're talking Division I baseball, around 90 miles an hour is probably the baseline for you to start drawing some attention. Doesn't mean that you can't get recruited throwing under 90. There's plenty of guys that do. But when we're talking about trying to find ways to stand out, getting to 90 is definitely a good number to try to get to for Division I baseball. But what are some other things, maybe you can touch on the velocity a little bit more, but like what are some other areas that you focused on or you think kids should focus on when it comes to building a good product?
Yeah, building a good product, I think, yeah, number one is velocity, 90 plus, as you just said. Number two would be being able to just compete. So, at the time when I was at Driveline, yeah, I was sort of 90, 93, but if you put me in a game, I probably would walk everyone. So you need to be able to be going out there and competing. You don't need perfect command or anything. Just being able to throw strikes and show that you're able to, compete would be my next big thing. The academics is huge. Just being able to get a decent SAT score, a decent GPA. And I mean, if you don't have that and just can't get it, then you're just gonna have to compensate with your skill. You're gonna have to get even better to compensate for the academics. I think another one would be this is kind of like a weird one, but just kind of like how you carry yourself. I think you don't want to be doing anything like stupid or like silly in front of college coaches, and you want to be talking professionally when you're talking to them. And especially in like social media, don't put anything stupid on there. I think those four things, if you can nail those, you'd have a pretty good product to where any kind of school would want you. Um, and you'd be good to go out and distribute, start the cold email process, start to go out on showcases, going out to show yourself in front of the college coaches, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, I like that. It's checking all the boxes in a way, right? Like coming back to, we don't want to give coaches a reason to write us off, and some of those reasons can be off the field stuff, bad grades, things that are in our control. If those things are bad and our skill level is just average or mediocre, like you're immediately crossed off. And I don't know if this is actually true, but I've heard, when I was in high school, I heard coaches say this all the time, is coaches are looking for reasons to cross you off the list rather than to add you on the list, because they have so many players that like they're looking for reasons not to recruit you. There might be some validity to that, but I think the moral of it is, if they're looking for reasons to cross you off, those are usually things that don't even involve baseball or like the actual skill of pitching. It's the grades, it's the off the field issues, or it's the on field issue of, showing up your coach, not being a good teammate, those types of things. All those little details are harder to quantify like that, but they are really important. And you want to make sure that your coach actually wants to speak highly of you and feels like he should stick his neck out for you to give you opportunities, assuming that the skill is getting to the level where it needs to be for that school.
Yeah, for sure. I think as long as you have a good product, people are going to find you. And if you can check all those boxes, you'll be fine. Um, it's really, it's difficult, but it's simple to get recruited. You need to be good enough. You need to throw hard enough. You need to throw decent amount of strikes, have decent grades, and then you'll be good. But getting there is the tough part. But as there's a clear path to get there. So if you can work towards those things, I think anyone will be fine.
Totally agree. Well, I think that wraps this one up. That was a great episode.